In 1945, just a few days after Buchenwald was liberated, there is a picture of a few survivors who made up a sign, and on the sign are the words, "Never again." We know those words. We're familiar with them. And think about the wisdom and the fortitude of those survivors. Who knows how healthy they were just after the liberation. And yet they had the wisdom to know that the lesson and legacy that they were leaving us and giving us was to make sure never again. So how do we make sure that never again is never again? We have been searching for answers for 80 years. And last week, right here at Shabbat Talk, Cheryl Silver Ochayon of Yad Vashem taught us or spoke to us a little bit about how she helps American teachers in middle and high school teach the Holocaust. Because that is just one way that we can try to assure never again. And why is teaching so important? Well, just listen to these statistics. 2/3 of young adults, 29 and younger, do not even know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Shoah. 1/2 cannot even name a single concentration or death camp. Auschwitz comes off of our tongues like anything else. They don't know the name Auschwitz. And the worst one is that 25% of young people deny the Holocaust or say that the stories we tell are exaggerated. That is one way that never again happens again, because they don't know. But statistics are not enough. Just making sure that kids can memorize 6 million is not enough, because then it becomes math class. Cheryl shared for us that the best way to teach the Shoah is to create personal connections, to tell stories. Any story will do, she says. We just have to help the students put themselves in the story and humanize it. One example you could use is the story of 10-year-old Charlene Schiff. She lives in Eastern Poland. In 1939, the Soviets take over her town, and things are okay. They're surviving. The Germans invade in June of 1941. Her father is arrested, and she'll never see him again. In August of 1941, Charlene, her mother, and her sister are forced to move into the ghetto. Ghetto life is difficult, as is to be expected. And Charlene and her sister sometimes sneak out of the ghetto to smuggle in some food because everyone is very hungry. Her mother is very concerned, but Charlene says, we have to go and smuggle food if we are to survive. Then, when it gets close to liberation, they hear that the ghetto is going to get liquidated. And so they decide that they can flee and use the chaos. Somehow Charlene and her mother flee to the east into the forest. Her sister gets separated and goes to the west. They never see the sister again. Charlene and her mother hide in a brook, really more just a bog. And when someone comes nearby or they feel fearful, they bury themselves in the muck with just their nose and their mouth sticking out. They'll sometimes spend hours like that. One morning, though, Charlene wakes up and her mother is not there. Where did she go? Charlene never knows, because she never saw her mother again. Charlene somehow survives for 2 weeks on her own in the forest, teeming with Soviet and German soldiers at the panic at the end of the war, until she is liberated by the Soviets. As a student, put yourself in the shoes of now 15-year-old Charlene. How do you cope with first losing your father, then your sister, then your mother, and having to survive on your own? How do you have the fortitude? And what lessons do we learn from this? What was so wrong about Charlene that entire nations were searching out to kill people like her? Now that we've gotten the humanization, hopefully, we can start to answer for these students the hard question: how did this happen? How did people start to become so monstrous towards an entire group of people? Well, then we can start to introduce stereotyping, prejudice, propaganda, and how the Nazis created a huge culture of fear that prevented anyone, or many people really, from bringing out resistance. And yes, then we can address resistance. And really the mantra or the lesson that what if really more people in Germany and in Eastern Europe resisted? At least the Holocaust would be more difficult. One answer to never again is that we all need to be Shoah educators, advocating for tolerance, but really reminding everybody that there are times that resistance is necessary. We need to resist hatred, intolerance, totalitarianism, and yes, obviously, anti-Semitism. The Torah portion for today is about blessings. And we recognize that each and every person is a blessing from God, worthy of dignity and human rights. Note that Jacob even blessed the children that he had been angered with, that had committed crimes. He was reminding them that they are a blessing and everybody deserves life. And so we have to remember and really to teach. To deny someone of their rights is an act of evil. But to stand idly by while someone denies rights is perhaps an even more heinous act of evil. I want to conclude with the words of Anna Madsen, who calls herself a free-thinking theologian, reminding us that we are all educators, and the idea, as the ADL says, never again is now. She writes, the Shoah and all that brought about it into being and sustained it was an utter abomination against humanity and against God. We need to become more aware of what happened, the why, the how, so that in knowing and remembering, it will never happen again. We must say, never again is always now. We must be vigilant and address any and all acts of intolerance. And we are called to refuse to cede evil any victory. Now, she writes, never again is now. Shabbat Shalom.